I'm Sam. I just want to first of all thank you very much for coming here tonight. I'm just going to tell you a wee bit about the group that's put this on tonight. We are a group that was started up about 3 years ago now. I got not well with ME and I lost the use of my legs for a while and I couldn't walk. So as you can imagine, quite a lot of time off work and had a lot of spare time in my hands. And what I decided to do is I decided to set up a blog to tell a funny and honest story of living with ME. After doing that for a while, a few people in my local area contacted me, and one of the things that I noticed from each email is that people just wanted someone to talk to who understood what it was like to go through everything that an ME sufferer goes through on a day-to-day basis. They wanted someone that they could talk to how when they said that they're tired, what it actually meant is that they were physically and mentally exhausted and couldn't get to the toilet, instead of just like, oh, I get tired quite a bit all the time as well. They wanted someone who understood what it was like when your legs are in so much pain that you feel like you'll never be able to move again. So what I did is I started up a local support group, and on the first night of our local support group, I was joined by Lindsay here in the front row and Laura over here. A wee while later on, we were then joined by the lovely Jill, and from then on, that was 2 years ago now, and we've been up and running for 2 years. We run a support group the first Wednesday of every month, where we come along and talk about what it's like to have ME and what it's like to live on a daily basis with having ME. We're also quite a positive group as well, so we do laugh quite a lot, which a lot of people think, oh, people with ME can't laugh. No, we laugh all the time. We laugh at how Laura goes to her work and is so tired sometimes that she has to stop in a lay-by and take a nap. We laugh at how when Jill goes to parties, she texts us and says, I'm really exhausted, I need to go for a nap, but my friends don't want to leave yet, what should I do? And we tell her, do you know what, see if you go into the bedroom, there's usually a pile of coats. You can always take a wee nap in there. And we also talk about the serious stuff. We talk about how it affects our relationships, we talk about how it affects our workplace, but most of all we're there and we support each other throughout it all. Recently what we've done is we've actually started a yoga class. So what happens is it allows sufferers to come and do different exercises to help manage their symptoms. We're a small support group, but we have been running for 2 years now, which is quite a miraculous thing for an ME support group. Because when I first started up, I was told people with ME can't run an ME support group because what happens is that they're too tired and it goes to pot. But luckily there's 4 of us running it now, so when one of us are tired, the other one just takes over.
It's wonderful really to see so many people here. And you may have seen this film, Voices from the Shadows, before, or you may have ME yourself and that's what's brought you here, or you may have a loved one with ME. But you may have never even heard of ME before and you're here simply because we asked you nicely and offered to buy you popcorn. And I know there's 1 or 2 of you, so thanks very much. You may also have misunderstood the title and thought that you were coming here tonight to see a horror film. And in a way you are, but it's not the kind of horror film that has scary monsters jumping out at you or hardcore zombies. Although I'm pretty sure most ME sufferers have probably felt like a zombie at one time or another. It's more of a personal horror, as Voices from the Shadows details the horror of living with an illness that is so severe, and yet many who are ill are suffering a cruel and invisible injustice, as they are often blamed, disbelieved, denigrated, and are suffering medical neglect and sometimes even abuse by professionals. So this film, it will shock you, it will move you, but I hope it will open not only your eyes, but your heart to the needs of over 250,000 sufferers in the UK alone who live with ME on a daily basis. Now, you might not believe it, but I am one of those 250,000 people. I mean, look at me, you wouldn't think so though, right? I mean, my symptoms are mild at the moment, but that wasn't always the case. I first became ill at the age of 9, and for many years since then have often been at the severe end of the spectrum at times. And when I first became ill, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents and I would watch films with my granddad. And for me overall, Rocky was always my ultimate film of choice. My go-to guide for going the distance and digging deep within myself when I felt weak. I mean, fighters fight, right? But as a child going through this, it wasn't always easy to understand what was happening to me or to fully articulate translate that to other people. But then after I saw Rocky 4, I realised that M.E. was my Ivan Drago. Now, if you haven't seen Rocky 4, and I sincerely suggest that you do, because it's a brilliant film. In fact, all the Rocky films are brilliant and should be watched. But Ivan Drago is this big, 6'8" Russian boxer getting ready to give the much smaller 5'11" Rocky the fight of his life. I must break you, he tells Rocky. Now, I know my Russian accent's terrible, but even now, every morning, when I wake up, I hear my body tell me that. I must break you. And then I play the big fight scene from the film in my head as Duke shouts at Rocky in between rounds. No pain! No pain! All your fire! All your power! All your love! Everything you got right now! This is your whole life here! Now, I know my Duke impression isn't much better either, but I'm hoping that you're starting to get the point. See, living with M.E. is a constant battle, but it's not one that goes on in front of hundreds of cheering spectators. It's invisible, and you do what you can to survive. So another thing that I started to do as a way of helping me rationalise and learn to live with M.E. on a daily basis was to write poetry. And I've written something for today that I hope to incorporate into a larger piece of performance poetry or a stage play at some point that I can produce as part of an awareness campaign that I hope to initiate. It's called Can You See? And I'd like to share it with you now as I feel it goes some way towards communicating what life with M.E. is through the eyes of the sufferer. So here it goes. This room of mine is like the plot of land my prison is built on. The prison, of course, is my body, and it rattles its chains within me. Clink, clink, clink. You better think. They say you've lost your mind, but maybe it's your spine. 'Cause you no longer fight back when you're under attack, and it's winning at every turn. When will I ever learn? Why won't they listen? Why won't they hear? They never really look at me when they bring themselves near to poke and to prod and cast down their heavy rod of psychobabble and textbook answers to the wrong questions. I remember when I was a kid, I used to sit in the dark like this, knees up against my chest, wondering why I wasn't blessed with a normal body, and I'd write poetry. Words streaming out from me as I got down upon my knees and prayed. Life, I sometimes wonder if death is better. As time goes by, I'll finish this letter. In some ways, you're really great. The others I will always hate. You are so difficult to understand in this weird and precious land. I can compare you to winter snow. How long will you last? I don't know. This was the first poem I ever wrote. I was 11 years old and the first line of my first poem was life. I sometimes wonder if death is better. I mean, I was 11. What did I know of hell or heaven? How was I to fix what was broken in me? How was I ever to set myself free? M.E. had me. This child in its grasp. My chest was burning and I could barely gasp the words. Help me, save me, stop the pain. I know it's coming from my body, not my brain. I am not insane. So these are my 11-year-old thoughts, screaming out from within me as the so-called professionals call me crazy, lazy, disturbed. And I am perturbed by this whole situation. Set ablaze as I gaze from the outside looking in. I am worn out, in agony, and I look to my mother and even she doesn't know where to begin to make this right, to stand up and fight for her tiny, broken, sick little girl whose light is fading from this world. Oh, okay, so listening. First time I've done that in public. But I made mention of my mum there in that wee piece, and I would like to take this final moment up here just to thank her. Because if it wasn't for her strength, and for her support, and for her nature being what it is to get to the bottom of things, and nurturing me in the best possible way, things might have been very different for me. You know, I've had great familial support, but not all ME sufferers have that. See, many are not only abandoned by the healthcare system that is supposed to look after them, but many are also abandoned by their family and loved ones as well, as they fall prey to the constant stigmatism that surrounds this illness. Voices from the Shadows offers up a window of opportunity to see this illness for what it truly is, and it's to be commended. So I give great credit to Josh Biggs and Natalie Bolton for making this film. You know, there is still much to be done in the way of raising awareness and changing the perception of this condition so that it can be seen and dealt with appropriately. Sufferers, well, they need to feel supported, and an appropriate care pathway has to be implemented so that those affected by ME are having their needs met. There may not be a cure, and we may not have all the answers, but I believe that the first step forward would be to really listen to the experience of sufferers, acknowledge and hear their voice, calling out from the shadows that many years of stigmatism has shrouded them in. And I hope that the film leaves you with a stronger sense of what those with ME are in need of and how we can better support that.
I'm in the fortunate position of being able to be the only NHS employed clinical specialist for ME that Scotland has seen so far. And I've been doing this job for the last 9 years. Previous to that, I used to work in the prison service. Don't recognise anybody from the prison service. And I was a clinical manager, and I tried to set up, and did set up, some successful chronic disease management services. And I think that's what got me this gig, which I've been doing for the last 9 years, as I said. I'd like to see a lot more uniformity and support for people with ME right across Scotland. And that's been a bit of a personal project, and I'll continue to strive and move towards that as much as I can. Moving on to movies, something I probably know a bit more about. And if I was casting Rocky, I wouldn't have put Dolph Lundgren or Sylvester Stallone in. I think you would have got that one. One of the things that I hear an awful lot is that ME is a fight, is a personal fight. I also hear other people say it's more of a dance. In a fight, sometimes you can be doing the punching, sometimes you can be doing the winning, and things can look quite good. But there's no bell, there's no end of the round. There's no one to say, yes, it's over, you won that round. It keeps on going because it's a chronic condition. So rather than a fight, I hear some people say it's a dance. It's a dance because, unlike a fight, there's rhythm, there's music, and that means there's rules. And that means that sometimes you can learn about your condition and how it affects you. You're able to predict the steps. And although your dancing partner might not be the most pleasant, you might step on your toes, have bad breath, or anybody else you can think of on one of these nights, your condition ME will have to follow these rules to some degree. And some people find that as a way of managing. So I like Kirsty's fight, and I hope you all fight a good fight. And I also hope that some of you can dance. The film itself, to quote a cliche, a picture says 1,000 words. This probably puts into practice what a lot of you could get your health professional to see. I wished it was available on a tablet and show your GP or healthcare professional this movie, and he would be able to learn a lot in a short space of time rather than you trying to find the words. Laura and I had a chat on the phone, and I mentioned that I think that ME is evil. So this is a wee bit of a horror movie as well. The ME being the monster. If a condition could be evil, it'd be one that's invisible. It can be one that affects you in so many different ways. It's completely unpredictable in how it's going to affect you next. How long it's going to affect you for, it won't tell you, it won't give you a guide. And it'll also take away your ability to explain it to others in the articulate way that some health professionals need to hear it. For instance, confusion between tiredness and what ME really is. Couldn't be further from the truth. So the movie itself says a lot for everyone, and it does speak to me.
I think if there's one thing that we should all take away from this film today is that having ME is a really hard thing to have, and it's a life that a lot of people are subjected to and they don't ask for it. And sometimes the worst part of having ME is the stigma that comes attached to it. So if everyone could just go away today and tell one person about this documentary, one person, and tell that person to watch the documentary and then to tell another person about that documentary, then perhaps we can make a change. That's all that I ask of you today.
It was a very moving film. Yes, there were some horrors as well. If I could fill a gap for a few minutes, if that was okay, well, guys might be thinking about some questions and just composing yourself. Fortunately, in NHS Fife, there's been only one or two people as severely affected as some of the people documented in the film. I wish I could say the stories were the complete opposite of what you saw, but there was a great many difficulties. Some of the difficulties also occurred with children, and this is one of the problems I have, is that I'll be entirely honest and say that a lot of my colleagues, I really don't trust them to give a proper diagnosis of ME, and a lot of the problems can take ages and ages until a decent diagnosis and a firm positive diagnosis is given, and they're working in the dark. Does anyone want to guess how long it takes on average for a diagnosis of ME to be given? Think of your own story, how many other different people that you had to see before you got there.
5 years.
5 years. Okay, who starts bidding at 5 years? We can go down or we can go up.
I'm hoping it's starting to go down. I mean, it took 8 years to diagnose me, so
8, that's a stinker.
that's a right stinker.
Yeah. I've heard of 12, 15, 20 years people been saying.
It seemed to be that the diagnosis was when it came to the post-mortem. You know, that's what I was reading into that. It seemed to be the thing that was most common in everything. It always say at the end, and you know, the person had passed over and said, well, at the post-mortem it confirmed it was ME, and that's what I found. It's really, that's kind of what shocked me.
Yeah, I think that's the confirmation seems to come at that point, because I think even when someone is diagnosed, they're still going through the problems of dealing with that diagnosis, because there's still such confusion in the way that it's seen and dealt with. So even when you do get a diagnosis, it's not really making the difference that it really should be making. I think that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah, I would hope the diagnosis is speeding up, and like the years that you had for a diagnosis was wrong. Even as a working diagnosis, it can be given at a much earlier stage. The UK average is 18 months to 2 years for a diagnosis of ME. I think that's way too long, by about 17 months to 2 years. Again, I can only speak about what I do in Fife, which on looking at that documentary is precious little, and I would like to be able to do more. I would like NHS Scotland to do a lot more, and uniformity and care right the way across all of NHS in Scotland is what I would strive to work towards. So as Sam said, if you can tell one person about this, and through social media and extend the net, well, hopefully this message will get as far as it possibly can.
I mean, I think to put it into perspective, we were talking earlier, there's 25,000, recognised diagnosed individuals with ME, and there's one ME clinic in Fife. It doesn't really cover much, does it? And that's the situation that we're in, and that's why this event is so important, and why we want people to speak out more and more, so that we can try and change that, to try and, you know, make a change to the needs and services and the provision of those needs and services.
I'm a very positive person, so I like to leave things on quite a positive note. These are severe M.E. stories, and there's a reason that this film needs to be seen by everyone, because it gets the true message of what having M.E. is really like out there. It gets the true message of what should be happening out there. But there's also quite very positive stories when it comes to M.E. as well. I think both me and Kirsty are examples of those two positive stories. Kirsty was very severely affected as a child all through. She lost her childhood. There's no other way to put it. She lost her childhood. She then went on to do some amazing things. She went to New York. She went to New York to live. She's not cured. She still has some very, very bad times. But she's got a reasonable way of living now that she didn't have before. I myself couldn't walk. It took me a year and a half before I could walk again without aids, and now I'm walking, and both of us are now doing things to raise awareness of ME. So there is some positive stories out there, so I don't want you to go away and think it's all doom and gloom, because there is positivity to be had out there for people who do suffer from ME.
I think that one of the positive things to take away from it is that to think that change is possible. It hasn't happened yet, but maybe this can be the start of that, and to try and look at that from that positive angle of, you know, I'm going to take what I have, whatever that limited resource might be, and I'm going to spread the word, and I'm going to make a change, and not just, hopefully not just talk about it, but try to implement it. So.
Kirsty, can you not get that film put on television?
That's a good point. I'd like to see it on the television.
Well, I was going to say to you, why don't you even get a CD and put them into doctor surgeries?
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
For doctors to see, because I work in a surgery, and I think they would be happy to see that.
That's been done. There has been a campaign to promote it last year, 2 CDs, DVDs.
The people who have made the Voices from the Saddle films have had it shown all over the world. They've gave doctors the options, they've gave the television the option, and unfortunately no one wanted to pick it up. So if anyone's got any contacts and would like to get in contact with the film, it's voicesfromtheshadowsfilm.co.uk.
That's also another reason why I would like to make my own documentary and why I'm developing my own documentary, because what I would like to achieve with my documentary is actually the implementation of change. I think what this film does very effectively is demonstrate and communicate the situation as it stands at the moment. But what I would like to do is try and actually go out there and track the progress of that possibility for change, and try and get to speak to the people that we need to speak to, get to speak to the decision makers, and try to actually document actual positive change within the situation. And you know, I might only be this wee actress from Glasgow that doesn't know that much, but I'm learning as I go along, working with the skills that I've got, and I won't stop until I have made some changes and actually televised those changes nationwide if possible. So I'm working on it. Might take me a while, but we'll get there.
Scientifically, have they come up with any improvements in like treatment for the future? Like, I know a lot of, you know, doctors disregard it, but is there scientists working on ways that they can maybe treat it in the future? So I know there's not a lot of medications out there that obviously help.
The majority of the medications that you've been prescribed will be for the symptoms, they're not specific for ME. I was at a science festival last year where they spoke about a drug called rituximab. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's, trying not to sound too much jargon, if you sort of glaze over, I'll understand. Beta cell depletion therapy, you heard that? Anybody got their first album? No. Beta cell depletion therapy, sometimes used to treat, well, it is used to treat certain types of cancers by working against the body's immune system. One of the theories being that the body's autoimmune system works against it. So the use of beta cell depletion therapy was discovered by accident by a group of oncologists in Norway. Any of you guys have heard about this? Yeah. I know Ewan will have. We were at the science thing last year for the ME Association. This is quite exciting. Because it was discovered by accident, this maintains its objectivity, because the doctors never intended to treat this person's ME condition. This was an improvement completely out of the blue of all their ME symptoms, and a small percentage had a complete remission of all their symptoms. Some of the symptoms remitting for over 2, 3, 4 years. And fortunately they were given a lot of money to continue the studies. And after, I think it was 30 to 40 people in the study, almost 70% of them reported improvements. Some still maintain that their improvements were permanent. So that is, for me, was the most exciting possible treatment in the future, because these are already at the human trial stages. And so that's one of the science-based therapies for ME rather than just the symptoms that I'm quite excited about.
So do you think eventually it will be getting prescribed then to ME sufferers, perhaps, in the future?
Yes, I expect it will be prescribed in the future. Initially, there'll be a lot of control around the condition. I imagine pharmaceutical companies will argue about it, what it's for, licensing, and this does take a frustrating and a long time. But that's certainly what I hope to see. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Andrew McGuire.
Can I just ask, I know that not every size fits all, but what would you say is the best treatment? Is it holistic or is it whatever? Yourself, sorry.
It's tough for me.
You're the expert.
Well, because when you have the illness, you try everything under the sun to try, acupuncture, Reiki, faith healing, going to your GP, and trying every medication under the sun till you're medicated up to the hilt. So, and then we get another symptom, you're back at your GP, and then you've got another tablet for that. So you end up becoming a druggie. So, and I'm just wondering if there is, like now that there was advertised like the lightning process where people were saying this was great, and so I just wondered if there was, why they don't do it, why they don't have a study to see how many people recover with this road or that road or whatever.
Yeah, I would like to see research for that as well. One of the approaches you mentioned, the lightning process, this is private, and of course the license for that means it almost takes itself out of objective study and empirical research. So that's difficult. But the other ones that you mentioned, acupuncture, Reiki, reflexology, a lot of these have been known to help, but they're aimed at managing the symptoms, and they tend to work quite well for some people, but not for everybody. You mentioned a holistic method. I guarantee if I was to do an assessment on everybody in the room, no two people would have the same exact illness presentation. The symptoms would be in a separate order. Some would be more neurological, some more pain, some more gastrointestinal. And so finding the right recipe for your treatment is going to be individual. So the approaches that I use are individualized. It's to the person. It's a tailored suit. One size doesn't fit all, in spite of what it might say on packets of rubber. So it's not true. You have to change it.
And I think that the current situation that we're in at the moment is that there's no definitive treatment guideline. It seems to me that it's about symptom management at the moment, more than anything else, because that's where we're at until more biomedical research is done and more trials are done, etc. So, yeah.
One of the other difficulties is the numbers. So any research trial that has to be done, for it to be of good quality, has to be many, many numbers. And that's one of the difficulties. Yes, there's 25,000 people in Scotland, there's probably more than 250,000 UK-wide, and it is growing. And even in spite of all of that, it can never be enough people to attend and cope with some of the demands of a research-controlled trial.
Because then a lot of the participants of these research-controlled trials are actually at the mild end of the spectrum and are physically capable of participating in a trial. Therefore, it's not a fully legitimate trial, because those who are at the more severe end of the spectrum may respond completely differently, but are ironically unwell enough to participate. And again, that's the harsh reality of the situation that we're in at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. It was quoted as being the biggest waste of money, the PACE trial. And the most disappointing thing is that it was labelled as being a treatment for ME. Well, if you had ME, you probably weren't able to cope with what the pace trial was going to put towards you. But for certain people, as you said, at the milder end of the spectrum, there was a few symptom approaches that it was beneficial to. But that's a misleading result. It wasn't a treatment for ME. These people in the film today, that's ME. That's what it really looks like.
Well, thank you very much for all coming out tonight, and as I said, if you could just please go away and tell one person about this and get him to tell one person, that would be great. Thank you very much.
I'm just out of the screening of the film about ME. My girlfriend actually suffers from ME, so I was aware of it, but the film made me more sort of aware. Very, very powerful, emotional to see the ME sufferers. We've got to deal with the sort of injustices of the healthcare system and stuff. Just really moving film, and just hopefully more people become more aware of it, and so that they can get the treatment that they deserve.
It was very informative, quite harrowing, and actually showed me to the point. I mean, I do know Kirsty, the ME sufferer, the actress who gave the speech tonight. She's done very well, I have to say. And I do know Kirsty, obviously, as an ME sufferer, and you know some of her symptoms and things like that. But I didn't actually realise the extent of some of the cases and actually how horrific it can be. And I think it was really good, very emotional to watch, but really good to sort of like get the awareness out there of what ME can actually do to people. And I think that you know, if this documentary can be sort of released in the UK to make more people aware, then they're doing a pretty good job. And if we can try and do something to help these sufferers in some way or another, then I think it's done its job.
I came here tonight to see this movie, and I would just like to say that it's opened my eyes to the illness. I was aware of it through Kirsty, however I didn't realise how harrowing it is to individuals, and it certainly, I'll pass on my thoughts to other people about it.